All right, dear colleagues, dear friends and participants, it's my true pleasure to welcome you to Umeå University, and I do this on behalf of the Arctic Centre at the Umeå University and the Centre for Arctic and the Antarctic at Luleå University of Technology, the Swedish Polar Research Secretariat, and the European Polar Board. My name is Peter Sköld. I am a professor here at the university, but I'm also the chair of EPB. So I have a double pleasure welcoming you. And an even better pleasure to introduce the first welcome talk here, presented by Marie-Louise Rönnmark, who is the chairman of Umeå Municipality Council. We call her a mayor. And she has been actively engaged in the Arctic Mayors Forum for quite some years now. So please, Marie-Louise, the word is yours.
So, Peter, thank you for that. And dear guests, friends, colleagues, a very welcome to Umeå. Where the heart is Umeå, if you're looking at the map. It's a true pleasure to greet you all to a place where a lot already is happening. And very, sometimes historical is now taking shape. We are located on the 63rd parallel, this is where Umeå is, in the Arctic. And we are also in the European Union, in Sweden, in Västerbotten, the county, and in Sámi, the land of the Sámi people. The indigenous people of this region, that is important to remember. Here in Umeå, it's not only people from different countries who meet, but also different perspectives, different way of living with nature, different stories about the future. And the Arctic, it's growing in significance for the entire world. And the Arctic is also gaining increasing geopolitical importance as climate change opens new transport routes. Access to natural resources is drawing interest, and great power rivalry is intensifying. That the EPB Secretariat is now located in Umeå shows that Europe's gaze on the Arctic is becoming sharper, and that Umeå is a natural place for shaping the polar policy of the future. This is something we are both proud of and truly happy about. Here is Umeå. We have the location right in the northern zone. And we have the knowledge, 2 universities, world-leading research in environment, forestry, and indigenous issues. And we have the ambition to collaborate, to think long-term, and to make a difference. Umeå is also a city that strives to be equal and sustainable. That's why we have long worked on urban planning from the perspective of different people, especially about how to even help the women to go to climb. We believe in circularity as a key to a better climate. And we strongly believe in the power of culture to drive growth. Creativity, curiosity are part of our DNA. In fact, one of our universities contributed to a Nobel Prize 2020, thanks to a discovery made here by Professor Emmanuel Charpentier. All of this says something about our level of ambition, but also about how things can start small here and grow into something big. And the fact that you are here today, ambassadors, researchers, policymakers, shows that the Arctic truly is at the center. It's no longer just about cold, ice, and distance. It's about climate, security, transport, resources, and about how we take responsibility for the future of our planet. And it's also about democracy. So once again, heartfelt welcome to Umeå. We are truly delighted that you are here, and let us inspire each other and make this high-level meeting the starting point for something even greater. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Louise. We proceed in the program, and it's time for me to introduce the brand new Vice Chancellor of Umeå University, Tora Holmberg, to welcome you to our university, a proud host of the EPB Secretariat. Please, Tora.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Dear guests and colleagues, warm welcome to Umeå University, a stronghold for polar research and higher education in Sweden. Ever since the university was established in 1965, we successfully performed research and education dedicated to the Northern Hemisphere and engaged in international cooperation. We're situated in the region of Västerbotten and thereby part of the political definition of Arctic Sweden. We share many of the challenges that the polar regions face today, and these challenges are many. In the increasingly unstable world order that we currently face, the polar regions have become a focal point of new geopolitical interest, as we all know. Security concerns have risen to the top of the political agenda. Simultaneously, climate change remains a critical issue of survival, with its environmental impacts on the polar regions evident every day. Alongside these challenges, we must also address economic, demographic, indigenous, communication, health, and well-being issues. Our focus on the Arctic region is of utmost importance. At Umeå University, polar research has been formalized and supported through the opening of the first Sámi research center in Sweden 25 years ago, and the establishment of the first Arctic Research Center in 2012. Today, we count around 300 polar and indigenous researchers at the university, and we're very proud of it. And they represent all faculties. We rank high in Arctic publication surveys, and over the years we have cultivated multidisciplinary collaborations and successfully operated numerous projects. The northern profile of Umeå University has been further strengthened by an extensive catalogue of Arctic courses, as well as an Arctic research school. Today, the most prestigious academic institutions are under attack, and we know about this, by political leaders who seek to undermine free research and education. However, the academic community must never accept being hindered by political interests that aim to restrict our ability to ask questions, to conduct research, and draw conclusions from our findings. The strategy to face these global challenges is international cooperation. And Umeå University has demonstrated its dedication to contribute to the cooperation and collaboration in polar research through a very active and dedicated engagement in international science organizations, such as the Arctic Council Observers, UArctic. Moreover, Umeå University is one of the members of the Arctic Six that aims to develop Nordic cooperation, and our networks also include many stake and right holders from companies, municipalities, county board administrations, ministries, Sámi organizations, and civil citizens. I'm convinced that this cooperation is crucial to defend free research and education, as well as to reinforce our competitiveness and attraction. European research cooperation is equally important, and the support from the European Union is essential. In 2019, the EU Arctic Forum and Indigenous Dialogue was arranged here at Umeå University, and we're a proud member also of course, of the European Polar Board. We're most honored that we have been trusted to host the EPB Secretariat together with the newly established European Polar Coordination Office. So with this, we actively show our commitment to the European cooperation, perhaps more important today than ever before. Together with all EPB members, we are stronger and ready to form the research initiatives called upon by current global challenges. And I wish you all, us all, a fruitful meeting here in Umeå. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Toda. It's now time to welcome perspectives from the indigenous Arctic communities, and I am so happy to introduce to you an experienced policymaker, Elle Merete Omma, currently head of the EU unit of the Sámi Council. Please, Elle Merete. Yes, if you go down on the corner.
It's okay. Okej. Våra baby. Jag bor spotting upp mig. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Umeå. I'm so happy and pleased to welcome you here to the heart of Sámi. This location is not only significant for its proximity to the Arctic that we study, but also because of its cultural and historical importance. We are in the land of the Sámi, an indigenous peoples with deep ties to the environment and a rich tradition of knowledge that spans over generations. It is a privilege to be here in Umeå, a place that is home to so many Sámi communities, including reindeer herding families and other Sámis that continue to live here in harmony with the lands and the ecosystems. I'm also pleased to share that we are currently standing on the traditional land of Ran Sámi reindeer herding community. And as a fun fact, that is also part of my history, since my grandmother also belonged to that Sámi community. The European Polar Coordination Office and the EPB Secretariat, based here in Umeå, serves as a beacon for collaboration and a hub for future Arctic research. Its presence here sends a strong signal about the importance of working together across borders, disciplines, and perspectives. I also choose to read this as a signal from Europe that they are ready to invest in knowledge production where also indigenous peoples are the beneficiaries. This is a moment for us to look ahead and with a hope and optimism as we embark on a journey of co-production of knowledge in the Arctic region. As we gather here, let us take full advantage of this unique setting to build partnership, ask relevant and pressing research questions, and design solutions that are rooted both in science and in the lived experience of the people who call this region a home. Arctic research cannot be done in isolation. It requires collaboration, dialogue, and mutual understanding. I have every confidence over the course of this conference and also in the future that we will share valuable insights, spark new ideas, and forge this kind of relationship that will lead to groundbreaking research and positive impacts for the Arctic regions and the world at large. Once again, Burgess Umeå, and also welcome. I really look forward to share your insights and comments to the conference ahead. And yeah, let us keep up the good work. Olo gihto.
Thank you, Elle Merete, and you will hear more from Elle Merete in the first panel after the break today, and you will also meet the next speaker in this panel, and that is the senior Arctic official, or Sweden's ambassador to the Arctic, Axel Wernhoff. Please find the microphone.
Hörs jag? Bra, tack. Thank you so much. And let me start by just saying that I'm so honored to have been invited here today and to have this opportunity to address you with a few words. I know a diplomat is famous for thinking twice before he doesn't say anything. But I will be short, I can assure you of this. But it's an honor to be here, and congratulations to the European Polar Board and that you have been placed here in Umeå. I think that is a receipt, so to say, over the high quality of Swedish polar research and our polar research community, represented also here on the screen, the Arctic Centre of the Umeå University, Luleå University, the Polar Research Secretariat, but there are also other researchers, of course, in Sweden and other institutions. And I'm a great fan of research and the scientific method, which needs to be, I think, respected even more as we move ahead. We are entering in a period now of great geopolitical turmoil. It's very difficult to have clear reference points in the world of today. You wake up in the morning and you don't really know what's going on and what's happening. Proposals have been laid on the table the day before and they are withdrawn a few hours afterwards. So we are in a period of geopolitical shift. And of course this also affects this work which we do here. And not least the Arctic. It has already been mentioned. And I think that the famous concept of the Arctic exceptionalism, a region of stability and peace, this needs to be re-evaluated. This is not only because of the Russian full-scale aggression and war invasion of Ukraine. There are also other forces at stake in the world today, and we see a general fragmentation going on, and the chips are still rolling, so to speak, and we will see where they fall down, if they ever will fall down, and a nuclear pattern will emerge. So in this new reality where we are, we also need to adapt ourselves accordingly, and this also comes to our Arctic policy, of course, and we are busy now in my team to evaluating our old Arctic policy, which was written in 2020 actually. Does it hold the ground? Does it stand up? To a very large extent it does. There are some things that will not change, but we are also living in a different reality, and not least in the Arctic. The sort of setup for Arctic cooperation in the 90s was with the aim of cooperation with Russia. That is not possible anymore in the same way as it was. So that's one thing that has fundamentally changed. But there are also other actors who are interested in the Arctic. Some have a rightful reason to have that interest, to conduct research, but it could also be used for other purposes, and we must be aware of this. So this is something we have to look into. It's quite interesting that the Swedish Arctic policy was formulated, in a sense, as a consequence of our membership in the Arctic Council in the 90s. And the Arctic Council, which is a unique multilateral organization, I would say in the world, where a number of countries agree on managing an area, or at least cooperating in managing an area, and also together with a structured dialogue with indigenous people, with the 6 permanent representatives in the council. And that is a unique setup in the multilateral system, and this needs to be kept and safeguarded for the future. We must not lose this multilateral organization, even though it has its challenges right now. But what is interesting is that the Arctic Council grew out of scientific cooperation. And not only the scientific cooperation, also cooperation between the different indigenous peoples in the northern circumpolar region. And out of that cooperation, the Arctic Council was born. So don't underestimate the importance of science, and science as a diplomatic tool, as an indirect diplomatic tool. That's a very important message I'd like to give to you. I think that leads directly up to this conference. And I think if you look at the need for science and the need for more knowledge and the need to harness data from the polar regions, it has never been greater than right now. It's, of course, about climate change. We need to know more about it. We need to know more what is really happening in the polar regions. Definitely. But there are also other aspects in this area. There are resources, both in the oceans, but also in the ground, which could be used, strategic resources. But if they should be used, they must be used in a very careful way, with deep consideration to both environment and the people living here. A polar region where no people lives, where there are no dynamic societies, is not worth defending. So I think that's a fundamental fact also we must bear in mind in this cooperation moving ahead. So it is, as you might have understood already, what I'm trying to say is that scientific cooperation can in itself hold the seed to also political dialogue when the circumstances allow that, and when the stars align, and sooner or later it will. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, or maybe next week, we don't know. But we need to keep some ground elements going while we wait for that moment. And there I think you all and the research you conduct is very, very important. So good luck with the conference today. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Axel. And not least for reminding the audience that this is a bipolar event. We are facing challenges and opportunities both in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Expanding on these perspectives is now made in a keynote address by Professor Antonio Quesada, who is a long-time EPB member and representing the Spanish Polar Committee. And the talk is named Socioeconomic and Ecosystem Challenges at the Poles in the Face of Climate Change, From the Poles to Global Impact. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. As well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be very original because my previous speakers have already told everything that I had in my list. So I think I will try to give the other perspective, also the Antarctic perspective here, because I think it's still important. And we can learn from each other, the poles. So I think that's quite important just to see this. Still, the polar regions are considered very under the romantic point of view of like the last frontier for most of the population in the world, because of the extremely harsh condition, inhospitability, they're very far away, not from here, by the way. But it's, and this provides a very interesting scent of these fantastic regions for all the world. Global change that we have produced at the mid-latitudes is hitting extremely hard to the polar regions, mainly in the Arctic, where we are, the speed of change is several folds larger than in the rest of the world. Of course, any effect of global change is very remarkable on the ecosystems. We all remember that picture of that poor, wet polar bear, very slim, just starving on top of an ice block, trying to find another ice block. But this is for sure happening. But what is important is that what happens to the environment happens also to the people, because people are part of the socio-ecological system. So they are suffering exactly the same like those iconic pictures. So we really need to understand that this is a real problem. However, we really need to understand that what we are seeing in the polar regions is not affecting only to the polar regions. It is affecting all the globe. It's affecting both hemispheres. And what we have been producing over 50 years of continuous emission of CO2 is coming back to us. It's coming back to the mid-latitudes because of the processes of teleconnections. So we have affected the polar regions, and polar regions are paying back to us. So this is a real problem, and this is what we are finding. How it happens? This is because it's very clear that the polar regions are the engines for the climate, for the global climate in the world. So what happens, we are modifying the climate in the polar regions, and those modifications are coming back to the mid-latitude. I would like to just express my condolences to the people that passed away from the last catastrophic event that we had in Spain. That catastrophic event is absolutely dominated by what is happening in the Arctic. That happened in Valencia. It was, in few hours, we have double the total amount of precipitation of a year in few hours. So it produced so tremendous flooding that it was impossible to manage. And everything was destroyed, everything was devastated. So the experts told us that more than 230 people passed away. So the experts told us that this was a phenomenon that expected of a recurrence time of 500 years. But the problem is the last 5 years, we had similar catastrophic events in the same region of not so intense, but we were having that kind of catastrophic events of a recurrence time of decades or centuries. So in last 5 years, we had a lot of those things in the same region. So it means that we are facing two very exacerbated catastrophic events, very important changes, modifications in the system, But this happens all around the world. No country is free of that risk. So now the population in the world has to keep ready for what is coming. The problem is that we don't know what is coming because our models for climate change and catastrophic events are very weak. They are not able of making prognosis of what is happening or what will happen in the future because those extreme events are difficult by itself. So it's difficult to know what is going to happen. This drives us directly towards the necessity of science. We need to understand what's happening in the polar regions. We need to understand much better to have better models and to get ready because what we are having now at every latitude is not going to stop. So we need to get ready. And the only way of doing that is science, going for science. The only way of getting more science is in collaboration. Everything has to be multinational, cannot be regional, because we need to have the global perspective. And for having the global perspective, we need the regional ideas also, but they have to be integrated. We know that after many years. We polar researchers, we know that after many years, because, for instance, since the first IPY, International Polar Year, that took place at the end of the 19th century, where Carl Bayprecht already, and then others, told us, 150 years ago, told us that the only way of understanding what was happening in the north, it was an Arctic expedition at that moment, was to work together. And it was 150 years ago already. And Carl Bayprecht already told us that we have to do under coordination and collaboration investigations. So this is very clear that it's not new. We know that after many years. So we have to go through that after all that. So this is 19th century, but after that, we had other 3 polar years, international polar years. And those 3 international polar years, we learned a lot of things. But I would like to remark, we have advanced enormously in the knowledge. We know a lot. We know much more than we knew before. Remember, at the end of the 19th century, the mid-latitude people were discovered in the north. So it was at the beginning, very beginning. But now, what we learned is that we have to work together. So it's remarkable what we had in the last International Polar Year, the 4th. It happens every 50 years. Okay? The last one, 2007, 2008, we were more than 50,000 researchers and technicians working together in more than 250 projects and produce an enormous amount of data and science. But what is more important is that we learned very clear that we have to work together. From that moment, we understood that everything has gone together. And we polar researchers understand that this has to go that way. There's no other way. But it's not only working together, having institutions working together, it's sharing data, sharing results. And this is something that we have to go for. We cannot stop that. And it's the only solution for learning. It's the only solution for, let's say, saving the world, saving the humanity. This is something that we really need to make clear. In Antarctica, we know that after many years, because since it was the Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1961, we know that, because Article 3 in the treaty says that we have to share results. And we are, by law, and we are sharing results. We are sharing activity, we are sharing information, and this is by law. And we have to do it. So for us, we are very happy and very comfortable with that. Perhaps the challenge would be to pass a kind of similar model towards the Arctic. Not the model of sovereignty, of course not, but the model of sharing things, sharing results, sharing ideas, sharing expeditions. But perhaps the largest challenge that we are facing these days is not the lack of knowledge, is not the lack of sharing, is some countries that they are trying to kill multilateralism. From my point of view, multilateralism is the most important point that we have obtained, at least in Europe, in the world, I would say, from the Second World War, and we really need to not to allow anyone to kill it, because this is really important. This is crucial for us, and it's the only way of going together. The geopolitical situation in the world nowadays, as my previous speakers told, is very serious. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Arctic Council entered into pause and is not recovered. So we are still in pause in the Arctic Council. And it's true that the Norwegian chairship of the Council has done the best they can do for stimulating science, stimulating technical questions. The reality is that the Norwegian chairship is finishing next week, and that moment, normally, in the normal times, it was a ministerial meeting. That ministerial meeting finishes a cycle, and the new starts. And that ministerial meeting that will take next week, will take place next week, is going to be online, and I doubt very much that many ministers are going to attend that meeting. So the situation is bad. But the question is not only that bad. The problem that really comes is that next chair of the Arctic Council is Denmark. So we are still have the Arctic Council blocked by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now we have Denmark and the chairship, and you know that there's one country, USA, that they are putting an eye on Greenland. Greenland, as you all know, is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. So now we are kind of two ways blocking of the activity. So we are entering a vicious circle that I really don't know how are we going to manage. I still believe that the only solution is science. The only solution is cooperation, collaboration, and science cannot be affected for all these things. Something that I would like to say is that we need to save the polar regions. We need to save the Arctic. Nowadays, as some of you said before, the resources that are appearing as crucial for the humanity after global change, after thawing the ice, we are finding that this is a risk for the geopolitical situation, but also it's a risk for the ecosystems, because the benefits and the design exploitation of those crucial elements are not designed for the people living here. And those are not designed for the good environmental health. So this is something that we need to keep very clear in mind. So everyone here knows that the Amazon is considered the kind of the lung of the planet, the place that we have to preserve. We really need to keep it, stop destroying the Amazon, because it's crucial. It's crucial for the globe. I believe that it is the same case for the Arctic. I really believe that the Arctic, as I told you before, is the engine of the climatic system in the world. So that Nordic Amazon should be kept alive. It's unique, and we need to preserve it. We cannot allow it to be destroyed by any interest. So I think that that's something very important. But the Russian invasion of Ukraine didn't hit only to the Arctic, also hit Antarctica. Antarctica, you know that I told you before, is governed by the 1961 Antarctic Treaty. That Antarctic Treaty is fantastic. You know that those that are of my age or even older know that in 1961, when the treaty was signed, it was the Cold War. It was the geopolitical tension was amazing. It was really hard, really tough. It was a very bad situation. I remember many of my friends just thinking about their parents, thinking about building a nuclear bunker to avoid any kind of radiation after the nuclear war that was coming, imminently coming. So the situation was much worse than now. But still, the governments were able of designing the treaty because they found that it didn't make any sense to go for a war in the polar regions. Both Antarctica and the Arctic, mainly in the Antarctica, because I'm talking about the treaty, in Antarctica didn't make any sense. So thanks to that, we are now considering Antarctica as the only continent in the world free of sovereignty claims and only given for peace and science. So this is really a very good idea, and we need to keep it. We need to preserve that idea. But still there, with those premises, we still have the Russian effect on the treaty, the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the treaty. We are discussing a lot of things in the treaty, and many of those things, some of those things, are blocked because of political questions. And this is happening now, but it didn't happen before. So now, without any scientific consideration, some of the points are blocked immediately because one of the blocks. So we are entering in a kind of block system that this is very risky, very dangerous also for Antarctica. So I think that this is a very bad situation that we really need to revert. We need to go back to science and giving geopolitical ideas, issues beside. Because we are risking a lot. I mean, it's not easy. We are risking a lot. And this risk is evident, it's obvious, it's against us. So I really believe. And under this geopolitical situation, I bring my plea. I believe that Europe and the European Union is the only consortium that can bring common sense to this situation. European Union is the highest investor in polar science, mainly Arctic, because we believe in science. So this is really because we need to go on with that investment. We need to go on funding science or even strengthening that funding. Is very important because we are very high in the rank of knowledge, and now every step forward requires some more money than before. So this is important just to keep the funding for that. And it's strategic, not only for Europe, for the world. I think this is strategic. Our values in Europe allow us to understand that the climate change is not imposed and that we are obliged to do something. We have to work on that. For us, it's very easy to work in collaboration in Europe because we are doing very well. I would say that. I am very pro-Europe. So we are 27 members and we are doing very well. One each other, everyone has their own different things, and it's the largest period of prosperity that we are having in the history of Europe. So it's something that we really need to understand, that this is very important. So I think that nowadays, European Union has to pay more, has to put more investments on science, in polar sciences. We are facing now big initiatives, like International Polar Year, number 5. This time is going to take only after 25 years. It's going to take place on 2032, 2033. It's very soon, it's close, because we thought that we cannot wait for 25 more years. It's too much for what is happening now. We are also facing the new United Nations decade for the study of the cryosphere. This is a great opportunity for the European Union to put some more effort on that and to push our researchers for working on that. So I really believe that the European Union has to put a lot of enthusiasm on the table on funding. So I think that's the moment for doing that. And I really believe that the diversity that we have in the European Union is a model to be exported to the world. So we are 27 members, different members, and associated members, each one with different differences, enormous differences in their culture, different ways. But this is our strength. I think that diversity is our strength. It's not harming at all. It's just our strength. So my plea is, European Union, please face what is happening, get a step forward, and get more enthusiasm for that. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much, Antonio, and not least for highlighting the two focal areas of this event, namely the upcoming IPY 2032 to 33, but this is a process that has already started. It needed to. It's a lot of investment behind it. And of course also the decade of action for cryospheric sciences that we look forward very much to be part of. And to introduce these two items a bit further is the next speaker, Henry Burgess, who is the president of IASC, the International Arctic Science Committee, and also leading the executive committee of the IPY. And now we have to rely on technology since Henry is, I assume, in Glasgow.
Thank you very much, Peter. I hope you can hear me. Please say if you can't, if that makes sense. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. It is exam season in the UK and our daughter is just starting exams, so I have to be here. But thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today. I'm very grateful that the European Polar Board has made the International Polar Year, along with the UN Decade, a key part of your discussions here today. And so thank you very much for that, for the opportunity to present to you. As Peter, as you have said, I am Henry Burgess. I am the president of the International Arctic Science Committee, and I am part of the executive committee for the International Polar Year. But we all have the same status within that group, and I'll talk a little bit about that in due course. As you can see from my background, I'm also from the UK, from the UK's Arctic Office, and in that capacity, I am the EPB alternative member for the UK. So I have a few slides to share with you this afternoon, and I really do want to keep this fairly short and factual. I'm very grateful to Gerlis Fugman, our executive secretary, who is online as well. And Gerlis has very kindly prepared these slides that I am sharing with you today. So as Antonio has said, this is the 5th International Polar Year that we are working up to in 2032-33. There have been 4 in preceding years, starting in 1882-83. Each of those have had a very different character and format, going from essentially exploration in the very first phases, or what we would now think of as exploration, through to weather data, through to observations, through to establishment of research infrastructure and beyond. So we build in thinking about the IPY on the success of the previous versions, but we also want to acknowledge and to celebrate and to work together within the future in terms of co-production, the millennia of Indigenous peoples' knowledge, particularly in the Arctic. We started this planning phase for the International Polar Year quite some time ago now, and I'm conscious that there are people in the audience and certainly people online who have supported that process, and thank you very much to everyone who has. And we started it really back in early 2021, and we did that deliberately to make sure that we were starting on a very open, straightforward international organization basis. Of course, international polar years have been a success because countries have funded them, they have invested in them, they've taken leadership roles. But particularly with this fifth IPY, we wanted to make sure that the driving force, at least at the start, were international organizations. IASC, SCAR, WMO, International Science Council, University of the Arctic, APEX, IASA, and other partners, because that's really where the ethos, the philosophy, the drive for International Polar Year really must come from. Antonio has already said that this is 25 years since the last one rather than 50 years, and that was a deliberate choice because we recognize the threats to the Arctic and the Antarctic. We recognize the speed and the depth and the breadth of change, but also we recognize the opportunities there for better observations, for deployment of cutting edge observation systems and monitoring. All of those are dramatically more significant than they have been in the past. And so as the time period for change and the time period for innovation technology improvements shortens, then we wanted to make sure that we weren't waiting too long to run the next IPY. So we have been communicating where we've been up to through these concept notes. And the last concept note was available in March 2025. And all the organizations involved in the planning group in the International Executive Committee are all part of these concept notes. And you can see those logos there on the screen. We also have a logo for the International Polar Year, 32-33. And we now have a website as well, which was launched in October 2024. So all the information that I'm giving you here is available mostly in the concept note and completely in the website. And that is the place to go to read the very latest on the International Polar Year. So there will be an event section that's added for IPY planning and consultation activities. That will be added soon. And there will also be an IPY network mailing list. We will continue to do as many of these updates as we can, but we're conscious that we are now moving into the time when we need to have a mailing list. So please do keep an eye out for all of those. I'm very grateful to the University of the Arctic who have been supporting the IPY5 website. That's really, really important. This is absolutely, through the whole IPY approach, a partnership of equals, of people who are committed to doing the right thing with the International Polar Year, who have a track record of success. So I'm very grateful to all of those partners. I will share with you this timeline, which I think some of you may well have seen before, but it evolves and it changes and it develops, and we add new parts into it. The idea of a timeline is to take us from the previous IPY in 2007-8 right through to 2032-33, but also to look beyond that as well. And the most important arrow on this timeline is the one in the top right-hand side where it says ramping up of IPY projects. So we would like 2032-33 to be a peak of activity, a kind of a real burst, a concentration of activity, of research, of knowledge, of understanding, both in the Arctic and the Antarctic. But we don't have to wait until that point. We're conscious there is a lot that can start now or very soon and lead up to the IPY. And there are things that can start in the IPY years and then continue beyond that as well. We decided that we didn't want to push for an IPY decade because the success in the past has been to concentrate in particular years. And we think there is a benefit to having that big pulse, that focus on activity in 2 particular years. But equally, we didn't want to restrict ourselves just to those 2 years. So that's the planning. That's the basis on which we are planning. We have tried to cover in this slide a sense of the wider research ecosystem and sort of political dynamics as well. So we've covered the ICARP process here, which is the process we will use on the Arctic side to bring forward what we think will be the science priorities on the Arctic side of International Polar Year. And we also want to reference and to credit and to work with the relevant UN decades that are here as well. And you'll see towards the bottom of the slide there, the UN Decade of Action for Cryospheric Sciences. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our next speaker with the update on that. And you can be sure that the leaders of the International Polar Year and the leaders of the UN Decade will be working together very soon to make sure that we complement our activity and we support each other where we can, and we kind of really drive value out of the fact that both of these things will exist, and to really make those a success. And at the bottom of this slide here, you can see that we've also included the beginnings of some of the large-scale international activities. So Arctic Pulse, which is destined for Canada, Antarctica in Sync, which will be an international initiative in the Southern Ocean, hopefully, and then Arctic Ocean 2050, which is being led by Norway, but there was a great hope that other countries, potentially including the UK, will be partnering with those initiatives. So we recognise that the International Polar Year is an opportunity for very large-scale international initiatives that exist over several years and will make a really, really big difference. But equally, there are going to be national initiatives and smaller initiatives and initiatives by private foundations or by companies, which also will be able to contribute. A quick word on the planning structure, because it's boring, but it's important. We have an executive committee, which is IASC, SCAR, WMO, and the International Science Council, with the University of the Arctic as a very valued observer and participant in those meetings too. And then we have the planning group, which are all the logos you can see on the right-hand side there, which is international and regional organizations, and we have one observer at the moment as well. There will be more committees, of course, to be added into the future, and perhaps the most important of those will be on national involvement. So the very last thing we want to do is cut national organizations, governments, research councils out of this. That's absolutely not the intention. The intention is to bring them in a national committee at some point, probably during the course of a later part of this year. So there'll be an opportunity for all countries who want to be involved in International Polar Year to nominate a point of contact and be part of that group. And they will have a really, really important role to play in the future. The planning group is absolutely not a closed shop. So if anyone, any regional or international organization, union, association would like to join, they will be very welcome to apply. So please do think about that. I'm very happy that European Polar Board was in there right from the very start. That's been really great to see. And they've been a very positive and practical contributor. So other organizations can join, but it is very much an active group. So it's not about joining, representing a view, and that's it. But this is really an opportunity to help direct what the International Polar Year will do, but also bring commitment and resources and in-kind contributions to the table. So as well as the planning group, we will also have a series of task groups which will take on specific jobs within the International Polar Year. Some will last for a year, possibly. Some may only last for a few months. They will come and go as they are needed. And you can see the 4 groups that we have at the moment here on vision and priorities, country and funders involvement, Indigenous leadership and involvement and coordination, and capacity building, and then early career coordination. And there will be more to be launched in the foreseeable future. If you have ideas for specific new task groups, please do let us know. Equally, if you would like to be involved in those task groups, then that's also possible. So people can be nominated from within the planning group, or it might be possible to bring other people on as part of those task groups as well. The first one here that's mentioned, the vision and priorities one, is extremely important. And we are hoping that group will be finishing its work around the autumn time, if not slightly before. And that will be that will give us a sense of what the International Polar Year will be able to do, the kind of the difference it will be able to make, the urgency, the importance, the relevance, particularly the relevance to the population of the Arctic and those that live and work and study in the Antarctic, but also to the wider global population. Why should the population care about change, about better understanding the Arctic and the Antarctic, to make a real practical connection to people there? People have also asked about the IPY Secretariat, and that's a really good question. We have gone from really having just a very small number of people and part-time to a much larger group of people, all of whom are still part-time but extremely valuable. So we have from the names you can see there from IASC, from SCAR, from the International Science Council, and together they make up a really good interim secretariat. We're not suggesting that this will be the final form of the secretariat. We know that as IPY approaches, as the tasks get bigger, as there is more interest, there's more to do with the mailing list and consultation events, we will need a bigger and probably different secretariat. But we do have a good capacity now, thanks to all these individuals and their organizations, to really support the further development of the International Polar Year. There will come a time when we may ask for more support as a planning group or as an executive committee, and we will make that clear to everyone, so there is an opportunity for other organizations or countries to put themselves forward to provide more support. But I'm very grateful to all of these people who are really putting in an enormous amount of work to make the IPY planning the success that it is at the moment. So let's finish on more or less on next steps in 2025. So there is the chance to have more task groups on specific issues and parts of the planning process. We will continue outreach like this at every conference and at every event that we can find. We will be collectively at the Antarctic Treaty meeting. Shortly, we will be at Arctic Circle Assembly and Arctic Frontiers and many other events as well. We will be thinking more about the hosting and funding for an IPY planning secretariat, and then we'll be thinking about the ramp-up period, that 26 to 31 period for the International Polar Year, and particularly how we are going to deal with the endorsement phase of IPY projects. Because we hope, we expect that people will want their projects to be endorsed as part of the IPY framework. But equally, that needs to be something that is rigorous and valid, but also as light touch as possible, so that we can be as inclusive as possible. But it is important that that is a rigorous process, because there is the potential to undermine the International Polar Year if we're including things within it that actually are not gathering widespread support and risk weakening the International Polar Year. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much. Apologies again that I'm not with you in person, but I will stay as long as I possibly can. If you have questions or comments, please do contact us either through the website or on the email address there. We're very happy to get back to you. And I look forward to seeing you again at consultation events. And thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, and good luck with the continued work with the IPY. I really look forward to it. And we all know that the cornerstones of cooperation and communication and coordination will be very, very important here, as will national and international funding initiatives. Without them, there will not be an extensive IPY. But in the program, we also have highlighted the UN Decade of Action for Cryospheric Sciences. And I'm honored to introduce to you Mr. Anil Mishra, Chief of the Section for Hydrological Systems, Climate Change and Adaptation, focal point for the UN Decade of Action for Cryospheric Science. Welcome, Anil.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I will have some slides. While talking about International Decade of Action Cryospheric Sciences, Antonio's talk probably presented science, cryospheric sciences, and highlighted scientific cooperation. And I was in a better mood. But after listening to Henry's talk, the polar year is starting 2033, 34, or 32, 33, and in the preparatory process, they have done so much. The decade already started, so I'm really feeling, we have to catch up. The decade already started. So let me show you some of the slides. As introduced, I'm very pleased to be here to build this cooperation and synergy with the Polar Year, but also with the European Polar Board, to talk about how to move forward with the International Decade of Action Cryospheric Sciences. I work in UNESCO's Intergovernmental Hydrological Program. My background is a hydrologist, and for the last 19 years, I'm with UNESCO. Just to give information that this year, and probably some of you might be here, this community paper came out about glacier mass balance. The extent has been already told to us. It was also picked up by media, so I wanted to show some of these pictures. From 2000 to 2023, more than 6,000 gigaton of glacier mass has been lost, and in average 300 plus gigaton, and that really translates sea level rise. And 2023 year was particular in that context. But also the glaciers and ice sheets has 70% of the global fresh water, and 5% of the global sea level rise is contributed to melting ice from the heritage sites. I come from UNESCO, Education, Scientific, Cultural Organization. So we of course, only scientific organization, but also we are cultural organization. We also look at the heritage part of the climate change impact. So in that context, there was a Paris call for glacier and pole organized by France. And there was a declaration, One Planet Polar Summit. I'm just putting how the decade came into being in 2023. And based on that call, a resolution was adopted, sponsored by 64 countries last year, a little less than a year, by United Nations General Assembly, Decade of Action for Cryospheric Sciences 2025-2034. And there are, in any UN document, there are many, many paragraphs, but there are 3 decisions. The first decision is to address challenges associated with the cryosphere by advancing related scientific research and monitoring. Again, Antonio already highlighted science can build peace, science can build cooperation. So we really need to emphasize the necessity of advancing global scientific cooperation in this decade, and that is one of the reasons I'm here. Promote activities raising awareness to these big players, forums, European Union, United Nations, North-South collaboration on the importance of glaciers, snow, ice, climate system, hydrological cycle, economic, social, environmental impact, impending changes in the Earth's cryosphere, and to share best practices, and to build resilient society. And decision 3, UNESCO is tasked to take coordination effort in coordination with other UN agencies and including scientific organizations and stakeholders like European Polar Board. We started immediately, although we had a very little time, immediately started consultation with IPCC, WMO, in COP29 in Azerbaijan, Baku, then with France, which really put forward this idea. We had a consultation how to move with the decade. So we organized, why UNESCO? Why UNESCO was designated as lead agency? As you know, UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, published already World Atlas of Snow and Ice in 70s. We are working with World Glacier Monitoring Services and producing these glacier bulletins, many publications, including melting glaciers in the heritage sites. If the business as usual will continue, by 2050, 1/3 of the heritage site will disappear because of melting glacier. So because of our scientific credibility, working with scientific organization, UNESCO is tasked. And UNESCO was tasked, but we invited many organizations, including European Polar Board, to come to Paris on 20th March in brainstorming session, and Miguel was kind enough to be a panelist where we had 5 different panel sets discuss what are the further steps for the Cryosphere decade. And that time, this year was a special year. As you know, there was also UN resolution which declared very first Glacier Day, 21st of March. So we celebrated Glacier Day, Water Day, and we had many events, more than 1,000 participants in UNESCO headquarters. Our Director General is giving many events. So we try to highlight and bring synergies and build cooperation from the platform that UNESCO provided. Now, what we did on that day, 20th March, we organized discussion around 5 background documents, and it's a preparatory process. And in those process, of course, European Polar Board also contributed. The first scientific research, Cryosphere observation and modeling, we have the background paper. We are finalizing it. It was discussed. The second paper, policy advocacy for the decade. We have international Cryosphere and climate initiative took the leadership. ICIMOD, Integrated Center for Mountain Development, took lead to prepare education and capacity development background paper. We have International Science Council, which is also working on International Polar Year, took lead on socioeconomic impact, vulnerability, and adaptation background paper. And then Green Climate Fund and Asian Development Bank took lead to address bridging the financing gap. This is what Antonio also highlighted. So one of the multilateral agencies showed interest. Of course, many other agencies were part of it. So we had these 5 background documents, and I would be happy to share with you, but we are already developing synthesis based on the 20th of March, which will provide milestone what we need to achieve over the next 10 years. So what are the milestones? We want to have milestones set up for each of these 5 different groups. We would like to have a working group, sub-working group on global cryospheric monitoring observation prediction system, Cryosphere hydrosphere modeling system. And Antonio was saying about uncertainty in the prediction, giving example of Spanish flood. I will call it in hydrology, stationarity is dead. Past observation prediction no longer relevant to future, and we call it stationarity is dead in the hydrological modeling. So this is also really relevant for the cryosphere system. We really need to invest in science. So develop cryospheric scenarios, identify solutions and transformation of communities, how to build resilient communities. So we will be working on these milestones, and I really would like to invite scientific community and other stakeholders to work with us. There is a milestone from the socioeconomic impact, vulnerability, and adaptation. It is still work in progress, but we really need to integrate social, natural sciences, as it has been highlighted by previous speakers, the impact on the indigenous community, and also engaging citizens on citizen science process, really validating, calibrating data processes. So we are working on those milestones. We will have education and capacity building milestone. What are the requirements of hands-on training, workshop, capacity building on policymakers and media trainings. So we will be working on that milestone. And finally, policy milestone. Perhaps European Polar Board will communicate to European Parliament or European processes. But as UNESCO, we would like to bring it to UNFCCC processes, North-South processes, COP, climate summits. So we really need to bring the policy campaign to various levels, at the regional level, national level, and international level. And finally, financing to find solutions. How to finance upstream knowledge work, including data collection, monitoring system, risk assessment, but also how to build funding mechanism to really enhance some of the what we called best practices. So we are working on those milestones. And we would like to work on the synergy of these years and decades. This year, I would like to remind you, also International Year of Glacier Preservation. So UNESCO is also coordinating. UNESCO, another body, Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, is coordinating Decade of Action for Ocean Decade. This year, last year also, another decade, International Decade of Action for Sustainable Development. So we really want to develop synergies with all these international year and decade, of course, with International Polar Year. And how we go from here. We are thinking to create several working groups. But we are not deciding. And I'm very pleased to inform you, this morning, an email has arrived to Polar Board, inviting European Polar Board to be part of ad hoc committee to discuss what would be the structure of this proposed structure, what would be the structure, what would be the milestone. So European Polar Board, if they will invite positively, will be part of the process which will decide the structure of the decade. And this decade, we also already sent terms of reference, so there are tasks to be done. It's not just to come as a guest. You need to bring your ideas. And we will work together. And I want to give you an example. I work in the Secretariat of International Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, being hydrologist. This was established by UNESCO after International Hydrological Decade. And in the scientific community, any of you who would use water source availability in the world is coming from that decade, because UNESCO's International Hydrological Decade quantified world water balance in 1965. And based on that, an intergovernmental hydrological program has been established. I'm just giving an example. Perhaps after the decade, we can have a long-term activities for the Cryosphere. So we really need to think big. Some milestone. We had this brainstorming session on 20th March. Also 21st March was International Glacier Day. There is a conference, International Glacier Year Conference, happening later this month in Tajikistan, in Dushanbe. That was also by UNGA resolution. The Decade of Action Cryospheric Sciences will be launched during the Ocean Conference in Nice in France. And then UNESCO will have this year a new general conference. We would also have some events, and then we would like to bring some of these discussion and outcomes at the COP30 in Brazil later this year. And in June, when the Cryosphere Decade will be announced by head of the states by very high-level ceremony organized by France, we will organize again a brainstorming session based on this discussion, and we have invited European Polar Board to be participant of this session on 7th of June at the Cryosphere Pavilion during Ocean Conference. We will also organize International Science Dialogue, Cryospheric Changes in Arctic and Antarctica. And since this is still in the development phase, I would like to have your input as we are designing this program. And with that, we brought this community from the scientific professional organization working on Arctic, Antarctica, terrestrial glaciers, but also universities, research centers, more than 40 organizations, including European Polar Board, we invited in the brainstorming session. We consider them already part of the process. And we will continue to work with these organizations and many more. Maybe I will have a chance to talk to you after this, to really make the decade a successful decade. And we have already launched the website. We have to populate it. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anil, and to you and to UNESCO for initiating this tremendously important decade. And on behalf of the EPB, I promise you to thoroughly consider your very gentle offer. We have one more talk before the break. We've lost some time, so we will shorten the break a bit. You will be called back with a bell ringing, and maybe we steal a few minutes from the reception time as well, but not at all putting any pressure to the new executive secretary of the EPB, Dr. Maria Gregorato, who will address the key stones of our activities with the title Towards a Unified Yet Diverse European Polar Voice, Coordination, Collaboration and Communication. Please, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And yes, I'm sorry that we're running a bit late, but we promised a break for the in-person participant, but also for the around 30 online participants that are here. And I hope that after the break, we can see more of them on the screen there. So EPB this year celebrates 30 years of existence, 30 years of experience on gathering national voices and connecting regional actions with global initiatives. We started in 1995, and since 2015, we're an independent non-profit organization. We were based in the Netherlands with NWO, one of our members being our hosts. And since January 2025, we moved here in Sweden. And Elle Merete already said a little bit about the history where we are here, but EPB acknowledged that we are in the Sámi land and we're based in Umeå University campus, and the history and the rights of the Sámi people. Our mission is to enhance the European coordination in both poles, Arctic and Antarctic research, through improved information sharing, optimized infrastructure use, and joint initiatives between the members. And our vision is for EPB to be a network where it brings different actors together for a unified yet diverse European research polar voice, where members can still see their priorities and interest in this collective effort. So that means, how can we unite existing initiatives? How can together solve some critical gaps? How we can integrate national capabilities into a shared strategy? And we're also interested in communicating science, so the society can understand the relevance of science, and for science also can understand the need to meet some societal needs. Our current strategy has 3 pillars, which is collaboration, communication, and coordination. We think these are the key elements for having this unified but still diverse voice. And our strength is a very composite, diverse membership. We have 31 members by 22 European nations. And we represent science, logistic operators, governance, and funders. So this brings a holistic perspective on topics that we discuss. And we also have a strong bipolar vision. We're one of the few organizations that cares equally about the Arctic and the Antarctic. We also have a strong presence in international fora. And these are some examples of some long-term partners that we work with, and we share advice and updates in both Arctic and Antarctic.
Since 2017, we have also created some action groups that help the members to contribute to some activities and even produce some products that they can be of use for the international polar community or even before. And I'm not going to go into the details. Here's just some examples. We have action groups on polar infrastructure, international cooperation, environmental impact of polar research and logistics. And this is just one example of something that EPB developed with a lot of different partners that you can see on the bottom. We developed this tool where people and operators and scientists can see where the research infrastructures are and help them plan their activities in poles with input for all, from operators all around the globe. And moving from the regional scopus, which is Europe, and being a bit more specific on EU actions, EPB is also joining EU actions. We are joining projects where we're focusing more on science, communication, and dissemination with the policy interest in mind, and we have been one of the key coordinators for the EU Polar Cluster. For those who don't know, the Polar Cluster, it's an initiative that happened from a very important EU funding project that a lot of our EPB members were part of. It calls PolarNet, EU PolarNet, and it developed a platform where the scientists that conduct research with EU funds can meet, can join forces, can merge activities, and also have a direct contact point with policymakers when asked. And since January 2025, we're very happy to have the European Polar Coordination Office that builds on the results of these two successful EU PolarNet projects. And these projects, I'm not going to go into the detail. A lot of our members were part of these projects if someone wants to talk to them later, and for the online participants afterwards. They did an in-depth work on identifying research priorities for the polar ecosystems, on developing a polar infrastructure catalog, and they coordinated the European research for 10 years. And one of the outcomes was the EU the EPCO. And since May 2nd, we have our officer, which is Kylie, and I invite the in-person participants to interact with her later at the break and the reception. And she's an expert in marine mammal ecology and brings a lot of experience in science policy interface as well. So now Kylie will try to put EPCO with the support of EPB in place, and we wish her all the best. So EPCO, what it tries to do is to support and enhance the coordination across European polar research community at the EU level. And it aims to function as a central point, contact point for the European polar research community, the policy makers and decision makers, including the Commission. And so EPCO will take over the coordination of the EU Polar Cluster, and also the Catalyst platform, that this goes beyond the science policy interface. Everyone who is interested in polar topics can just join, register. You only need one email, and then you can create discussions or follow discussions. And through the stakeholder engagement portal, you can find information and knowledge produced from EU projects related to both poles. And this meeting today is also thinking how we can have this European diverse united voice and present also in IPY in the decade of Cryosphere. And I thought that this was a nice way for me to finish this presentation by giving some examples on how EPB can potentially contribute to that. I just want to say that, first of all, our EPB members, 31 members and 22 nations, they will decide their own contributions to these activities. But EPB creates this collaborative effort where the members can meet. And already we have a lot of EPB members being joining in IPY as in the planning committee, as organization, national representatives. EPB, through me, we're part of the some of the groups of IPY, and we have established own connections with UNESCO, as Anil presented, and we were present at the brainstorming session they organized. So, thinking of this collaborative contribution of our 22 nations through their 31 members, how that can be seen in the decade and Cryosphere. Here, I'm just bringing some examples. As you understand, this is a process that it's ongoing, so we will also adjust our decisions as we go, and especially as we see the decade and the IPY being further developed, and we have a better understanding of the objectives and the missions and the goals. But EPB, as an organization, we can promote the actions and guidance the countries, how they can contribute. And this is very important because sometimes we're lost in translation. And we can also, EPB as an organization can be seen as a communication bridge. We anticipate that our members and other bodies interested in those two actions, they will contribute in one way or another, but maybe not equally for all the activities and all these big portfolios. So EPB can help create this communication so organizations and bodies stay up to date. And also create awareness and engagement campaigns with a bipolar focus. If we include also EPCO in that equation, then EPB and EPCO, we can help to coordinate, communicate, and promote the European polar voice together. So all our members, EPB has already a very strong European polar voice, and with EPCO that coordinates the science at the EU level, we can bring this very strong unified voice into place. And we can try and see cross-cutting actions, minimize fatigue and duplicated efforts, and how we can organize initiatives that they can be diverse and inclusive and also meet different targets and bring different bodies together. With the IPY, the decade of Cryosphere, other initiatives on the way. We can also contribute to actions towards research prioritization. EPB, our members, and EPB as an organization who have experience on that, and how we can facilitate actions to enhance collaborations. And something that is very important for us, we don't see any success of IPY and the decade of Cryosphere if early careers are not actively involved and participate in these initiatives. Most of us will probably be with one leg outside the scientific community by the end of those activities, but we need the new leaders to be there from the beginning and also have a word and a say on what is being decided, because they are the ones that they will have to take this responsibility on their hands. So EPB will try to promote and support the active participation of the early careers through APEX and the EU funding projects as much as we can. And this is all I wanted to say. I tried to stay on time. So thank you very much. And Peter, I will give the floor to you. I guess we will meet in a few, we have 20 minutes break or something, and meet. So maybe we'll say we meet at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, well, they will be called back
Yes,
with the
yes,
bell. So
we also have the online participants. So I don't know what
true.
time is your time where you are for the online participants, but we can say we meet at 3 o'clock, and then we have the panel discussions and then informal discussions as well.
So, welcome back everybody into this room. Hope you had a good coffee break, and also welcome back everyone who is online and following us on screen. So I'm speaking a bit slowly here because we are bringing out another table for the panelists. But meanwhile, I would like to wish you all welcome to this panel with the title Towards the European Unified Yet Diverse Polar Voice to Meet the Challenges Faced by Europe and Globally in the 21st Century. I am Dag Avango. I am the director of the Center for the Arctic and Antarctic at the Luleå University of Technology, and also representing that organization in the European Polar Board. And I will be the moderator for this panel. And this panel will discuss how Europe can strengthen its polar voice through collaboration, through policy engagement and public relevance. And the discussion will draw on present experiences in order to identify pathways for moving forward and for ensuring that polar science remains impactful. And our panelists, they will address how to enhance the relevance of scientific research for society, for integrating science into policymaking, and to foster long-term resilience in the face of uncertainty. And the discussion will also consider how to bridge trust gaps and making present and future planning more fruitful. So I will go on to present the panelists, and I will do that in alphabetic order. The first one being Keith Larson, who is a transdisciplinary ecologist with almost 30 years of experience in conducting environmental monitoring and research from the Arctic to the tropics. Welcome, Keith. And Keith is also the director of the Arctic Centre at Umeå University. The second panelist, Elle Merete Omma, who is the head of the EU unit at the Sámi Council, and she was raised in a reindeer herding family in Norway and Sweden, and previously have served as the executive secretary of the Arctic Council's Indigenous Peoples Secretariat and a senior advisor on Sámi affairs at the Norwegian Ministry of Local Government Modernization. Welcome. Third panelist is online, and that is Eva Ortega Paino, who is the Secretary General for the research at the Ministry of Science in Spain and also the chair of the Spanish Polar Committee. And she has an extensive background in biochemistry and molecular biology with a doctorate from Complutense University of Madrid, and has also been on several stints at Lund University in Sweden. Third panelist is Axel Wernhoff, who is Sweden's Arctic ambassador and dedicated to enhancing the country's Arctic engagement on both national and international level. Welcome. And then it's Rebecca Tapper, who is from APEX, the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists, and a board member of that organization, and a PhD student in the Department of Epidemiology and Global Health here at Umeå University, and has a PhD project on Arctic health. And some words about myself. I come from a multidisciplinary background with one leg in archaeology and geography and the other one in history. I have done research in the Arctic and Antarctic for more than 25 years, looking at the interaction between scientific research, economic interests, and political interests in the polar regions. And this panel is organized so that I will ask each panelist 2 questions each, and you will have 2 minutes each to answer those questions. And if we get some time in the end, we will take some questions also from the audience. So I will begin with a question for Dr. Eva Ortega Paino. But as I understand it, she is on a train in her online presence and has pre-recorded the answer to my question. So let's see if this works. So the question is, what are the main challenges and main opportunities that you see for national polar programs to align with the broader European vision on one hand, while at the same time maintaining local strengths? So let's see what the answer will be.
Hej allihopa och tusen tack för inbjudan. Hello everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really sorry that I'm not there with you, but it's been very complicated. Regarding your question, thank you very much for your question. We in Spain are fully supportive of multilateralism as an EU member. We feel very comfortable sharing ideas, research space, investment, and scientific initiatives. Our citizens feel also comfortable in the EU because we understand that the European Union is an organization that respects completely the differences. And we, as many other countries, are really represented by large cultural differences in our own countries. This is, in fact, a strengthening element of the EU. And this element can contribute greatly to scientific advancement. Diversity does not hamper advancement at all, but on the contrary, represents a very large benefit. Global negotiated large goals, as for example, the International Polar Year 5 or the UN Decade for the Study of the Cryosphere, can turn into the enhancement of the EU system, which will benefit from bringing on the table extra-European scientific initiatives. Finishing with your question, I would like to underpin that although European dynamics are not very fast, we need to evolve facing the challenges of large polar initiatives towards thinking more on Antarctic science as a priority within polar sciences, but also about ad hoc funding opportunities driving our European scientists to lead extra-European projects. We need to promote ambitious scientific thinking that will drive national programs to join efforts and find the direction, finally the focus.
Well, thank you very much for this, and I will continue directly with a related question to Axel Wernhoff. So from your perspective, how do you see national polar programs evolving to remain relevant and resilient in the face of rapid environmental changes and rapid geopolitical changes and shifting research priorities?
Well, I think one key element is that we, so to say, at the top of the nourishing chain in the government offices, we need to start thinking not in silos. We have to think and work horizontally also when it comes to these issues. And I'm actually glad to be able to say that that's exactly what we're trying to do now these days in trying to respond and to approach this new reality, which is not easy to define, but polar research should not only be handled by our Department for Education and Research, and polar policy should not only be handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to put it very simple and bluntly. But I think it's very important that we can combine all aspects of policy when we say polar policy. So we have created a working group which includes Minister of Research, Education, but also Infrastructure, Minister of Defense, our security policy people, in order to have a comprehensive approach to these issues. And I think when we start having that, and when we can put the framework on that, we can act outwardly also in a more integrated way. And hopefully it will seep through also in the system. So it's a two-way street where we have to meet from different areas in this field. So that's my very short answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you for this insightful response, Axel. And the issue of trust in science I mentioned before, and that has, of course, grown immensely in recent years and indeed in recent months. So my next question is related to that topic, and it goes to you, Keith. How can scientific research maintain credibility and trust with the public in these times, especially when addressing uncertainty in the polar systems?
That was a question I actually started thinking about around 2008 when I was a PhD student, when there were big questions about the trust in science and the trust especially about climate change and things like vaccines. And I think that we need to educate from the very beginning, or educate early career researchers at the very beginning of the research process about how to engage in science communication, how to do science communication well, how to be able to tell your story not in a very disciplined, narrow, siloed way, but to be able to zoom out and connect with people, to be able to create stories, to put people into the narratives of the science. Because if we don't do that, the science just becomes something that people just don't see relevant. So it absolutely is rooted in relevancy for people. And I think that, for example, in the ecological research that I've been doing, I felt very dissatisfied after years wondering why is it that despite all this knowledge about climate change in the Arctic, climate change in the other regions, we just aren't acting. And the more I've been involved in doing science communication, giving hundreds and hundreds of climate change talks to very little success in terms of changing that course, I realize a big part of that is that we haven't put people in the stories. And the Arctic, for example, is a human landscape. It's an environment that has had people, that have lived and adapted and been resilient for hundreds and thousands of years. And in modern times, people have lived and created a livelihood in these regions. So we need to be able to reach out to these people and put them in the stories. Much of the changes that we see aren't driven by some mysterious climate change process. It's driven by humans. Climate change is a byproduct of that, just the way the biodiversity, loss, pollution, all of those things. So we need to put people in the stories from different perspectives.
Thank you, Keith, for this excellent answer and for bridging over to the following question, which goes to Elle, Merete, Omma, and it's precisely about the relevance of Arctic and Antarctic and of polar research to the local communities in the Arctic and indigenous communities in the Arctic, and the recognition of knowledge that exists among indigenous people about many of the things that researchers study. So what approaches have you found most respectful and effective when working with European scientists to integrate indigenous knowledge into polar research?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I'll start by saying what is not building trust, because that's much easier. We have an internal joke at the Sámi Council that we could see when cold deadlines are approaching, because then our email box is swamped with requests to partner in various research projects. I mean, that is not the way to do it. I would rather suggest or talk about the other 4 points. I think it starts with respectful and effective approach to integrate indigenous knowledge, indigenous peoples, and even local people, like people on the ground, as Keith talked about, is to make sure that we are being involved full and actively at an early stage. Let us be part in defining the research questions to implementing the outcomes. And implementation is a separate topic that we perhaps could arrange another conference on later on. Nevertheless, I think this co-creation ensures that indigenous perspectives aren't just included, but they are at the foundation of the research question. So that was my first point. My second point is that Sámi communities, for Sámi communities, the green transition, having renewable energy project, mining project, or other infrastructure project, poses a direct threat to traditional livelihoods and Sámi culture. Yet, these communities are too often excluded from key decision-making process that is relevant to these projects. And one way of addressing this is by recognizing Sámi knowledge as a legitimate and essential form of expertise. So that was my second point. My third point is building on my second point. We see legal systems and policy frameworks that often disregard indigenous knowledge, which results in inadequate protection of indigenous people's rights. And I think here is the EPP can play a role, and EPCO, because you can help us bridge these conversations in a way to mediate researchers, policymakers, indigenous peoples, to foster trust, as Keith talked about, promoting ethical practices, and ensuring indigenous leadership at its center. And that leads me to the fourth question, because the Sámi Council has been working with research questions for a long period of time, harvesting lots of experiences that what doesn't work and what does work. And I would like to share an example that actually is born out of an EU PolarNet 2 project that was mentioned before the break. Because the EU PolarNet 2 project actually had something that they called, I don't recall the formal name for it, but it functioned as seed funding for smaller community-driven project. For the Sámi Council, this has been significant for our chance to develop our knowledge base. It's a best practice in my way. It's small money that make large impact and create change. And the tangible outcome of these, I think it was 15,000 euros that we should share together with other partners, was the roadmap for decolonizing Arctic research. And that sparked a conversation of, okay, what needs to change, what works for us, all that kind of language. And based on that work, we were able to create our own sets of principles for data management, ownership of data. We have also developed ethical guidelines for what we believe is research that aligns with our values. And when we had the opportunity to create that platform, that actually resulted in us taking leadership in develop a Horizon Europe funded research project. So I mean, baby steps, but very essential baby steps that created some change and build a trust. So I think that is how we have worked with these issues. And yeah, to a certain extent, we've been successful in doing that.
Thank you, Elle and Merete, for very valuable points. I wish I had been sitting taking notes on them. Really, really good. Another item that we have struggled with in polar research community for a long time, starting during the last International Polar Year, is how to better integrate younger researchers and early career research into both research, but also in the work with research to policy. So the next question is concerning that and goes to you, Rebecca Tapper, and of relevance to Apex. So how can institutions better support early career researchers in bridging the gap between scientific work and its societal impacts, especially in the context of polar research?
Thank you. First and foremost, I'm just really honored and privileged to be invited to actually be here and speak. And I think that is one of the first things that we actually need to do. Invite us to be a voice in a low threshold way. So it's easy for us to find and to be able to speak our mind, for someone to listen. But also for us to listen and learn. To hear what is happening and how we can help. The academic path is not easy to choose. We need to be specialized in our expert fields to compete with other seniors, but we at the same time need to see the broader picture. And we need to be able to collaborate, we need to work translational, transdisciplinary, and we need to be relevant enough for someone to care. But this is what we are training to do. So it's important to find established support and mentorship so we can use these skills to help and for you to help us to establish our ground. And this is why we decided to bring back Apex Sweden, which has been idling for a couple of years, because we wanted to have this hub where you can find us and where we can find each other, to create these new collaborations, to be able to communicate and to make research into something new. And we want to be a part of it. We are the future. So we're really, really grateful to be able to be here and listen and learn.
Thank you, and we are very happy that Apex Sweden is up and running, and that the Apex that was formed during the International Polar Year the last time is alive and kicking, and that promises for the coming IPY in 2032 to 33. Another thing that happened during the last IPY was that polar science in a broad range of disciplines became a part of the ongoing research in the polar areas, not only natural science, but also social science and humanities. And after the IPY, there has been a big recognition that we need to develop interdisciplinary collaboration in polar research. And the question to you, Keith, your second question is, how can interdisciplinary collaboration be improved to ensure that polar science addresses both environmental challenges and societal challenges?
That's an extremely difficult question. And I think the reason why it's extremely difficult is not necessarily that we don't see the obvious need for interdisciplinarity, but the infrastructures, whether it be funding, whether it be the institutional way that we're organized in disciplines, the way that we focus on very, very tightly narrow questions. We get funded because we're claiming that we're doing state-of-the-art, that we're filling knowledge gaps. And that structure makes it very difficult to create possibilities for interdisciplinarity. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I mean, for example, if you look at national funding agencies that fund research, traditionally there's been, annual research calls where researchers apply for research. Now it's not just those kind of calls. They're actually specific calls that are designed around problems or ideas. And many of those specifically require multi-interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary natures. But this is a cultural problem in academia, primarily, is the way I see it. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing is that if we as scientists see ourselves as citizens, we see problems differently than you see when you're looking for the state of the art, trying to write that very narrow research proposal to try to get the money to do the things that you enjoy doing or that you feel is important. And so I think that it also means engaging the research community, engaging ourselves, not just as a scientist, but as citizens, which means that we engage in the political process and that we have an opinion. But our opinion has to be, of course, informed. I'm not an expert on, the history of the Sámi culture in Sweden, so I don't have an opinion about that. I want to refer to you. I want to refer to the experts, the people who have that lived experience, that research experience. But I do have informed opinions that, for example, as an ecologist, I can't study the changing ecosystems in the north of Sweden if I don't engage with the Sámi community, who have been part of these ecosystem architects system, the reindeer creating and shaping these ecosystems in the Arctic. And the political process is the same thing. We got a border that was established between Sweden and Norway over 100 years ago. That shaped many different processes that we can see in the ecosystems today. And so this requires, by nature, interdisciplinarity. And so when we want to tackle problems like climate change, biodiversity crisis, justice, all of these types of things, these are interdisciplinary problems. They all have people in them. And so I need, as an ecologist, to work with my Sámi colleagues in the north of Sweden. I need to work with political scientists, historians, social scientists, and philosophers.
Thank you, Keith. So several have mentioned the importance of science-based decision-making, not at least pertaining to policies related to the polar areas, but also more broadly and globally. And most Arctic and Antarctic researchers feel it's really important and always argue that, well, the research we are doing is very important, not least for policy. So there's an agreement there, but there's also a question to be followed up from that, and I'm putting that to you, Axel. So how can polar researchers and policymakers improve their dialogue and cooperation to make this really happen?
As always in a dialogue, you have to be open for it and be prepared to take that dialogue. But also you need to be quite sure of what do I want to send, what type of messages should I send from a policy level. And there, again, I have to go back to my introduction. We are living in a period of geostrategic upheaval. It's like, I think I said that in the post to someone, it's like trying to orient yourself in a Jackson Pollock painting. There are no reference points. There's no horizon. You don't really know where you are. We are living in a very confusing time. And I know for sure that my colleagues in Europe, in the Nordic countries, and basically all over, are trying to figure out the Arctic policy for the future, because the old one doesn't stand the ground. It doesn't reflect reality anymore. So we have homework to do first of all on the policy side in order to be able to engage with the different, it could be national or international research communities and other communities, and also with indigenous people, and how we're going to navigate in this new reality we are in. I think it's extremely important that we, again, in this work, when we try to formulate policy, work horizontally and not in our silos, as I said before to the first question. We are, as I've indicated, evaluating our Arctic policy, all aspects of it. I think security policy will have a much higher standing in if we formulate a new one, but at least we have to respond to the increased geopolitical tension in the Arctic. Now, when it comes to the dialogue with researchers, well, I think this is an opportunity, of course. Here we meet. I can give you all my view of where things are right now, at least today. We'll see where we are tomorrow. And we need more meeting places like this, I'm quite sure. I'm happy to say that when it comes to the Arctic Council, where the political dialogue is more or less paused or frozen for reasons we have talked about, but in the machine room, so to speak, the engine room of the Arctic Council, in the working groups, which is science, expert level cooperation, there the work has restarted. And I'm very pleased also to say that that also includes Russian colleagues at that level. They meet virtually. And one conclusion we have drawn from those meetings, and I know that my colleagues in the different ministries of foreign affairs will agree with me, the Russian delegates are acting constructively. They are not obstructing any work at that level, which they are in other fora, by the way. And I think that's a clear sign that they also value that work in itself, in particular, but also the Arctic Council. So there we have sort of an indirect dialogue going on, and I want to build on that.
Thank you, Axel. So, second question to you, Elle Merete, kind of following from the points that you made in your previous response. So, how can Europe's polar community help strengthen indigenous-led research and support local resilience? And not just in the Arctic, but as a model for community engagement more broadly, internationally.
Okay, I think I start with the last part of your question, where you're asking for models that could be communicated to other parts of the world. From the Sámi Council perspective, I think it's important for us to say that there is not one size fits all. I mean, we need to be humble about that. We need to see that different parts of the world perhaps have other needs, other solutions. But from a Sámi perspective, I think the European polar community has a powerful opportunity and also responsibility to support indigenous-led research and strengthen our local resilience. The first step is to ensure that indigenous communities are in leadership roles from the outset of research projects. That includes, as I said in my previous response, designing research questions, methodology, use, and also the use of findings. You know, how are they communicated back to the communities that we're doing research on? I mean, that is vital. That is something that we need to discuss. I also think that we need to talk about how research programs can establish formal frameworks that support indigenous leaderships and decision-making in research projects. I mean, this again, it means designing research together with indigenous communities. It's about the architect of the research projects that aligns with our values and needs. And I cannot stress this enough. I mean, our needs to be reflected in these projects at an early stage. Also, I think it's important that we acknowledge the need for long-term relationships. I mean, even to take an example, if I browse through my email at the deadline
for project proposals. The project that I will actually perhaps review are from researchers that I have had some kind of relationships, or my organizations have had some kind of relationship to in the past. I reach out to my Indigenous network, like, okay, who is this guy? Is it like, give me some references, please. I mean, we do that. And perhaps the research community needs to be aware of that. You know, we do not live in a silo. We communicate with each other. So we know that you have sent the same email with the same language to several Indigenous groups, organizations in the Arctic. Sorry to break the news to you, but that's the reality. And the final point that I also want to make is that I think the funding agencies, as Keith said, also have a responsibility in making, to strengthen our research capacities. They must understand that building trust, ensuring meaningful involvement and co-production of knowledge takes time. And in these research projects, this time needs to be valued and compensated for. I also think that we need to talk about alternative deliverables in research projects. It cannot only be like a 500 pages research report. That doesn't reflect the community that we have been doing research on. And something else that I also think is important is to stress the use of Sámi language. And my final point is that we need to create a space, safe space, where we can discuss, you know, tension in this topic. I mean, it could be about open access to research versus use of Indigenous knowledge. That is something that we discuss a lot among ourselves. And I think at least we see, and I'm sure that you also meet that in your work, that many Indigenous peoples are very reluctant to share our knowledge due to the long history of knowledge extraction and misuse. I mean, we're still there. We need to have that conversation. And without engaging in these difficult but necessary conversations, co-production risks becoming just another checkbox rather than actually something meaningful and long-term impacts. And again, I think my suggestions doesn't necessarily reflect the needs of other Indigenous peoples globally, but perhaps it could at least be the starting point for a conversation, and that is also always a good starting point, I think.
Thank you, Elle and Merete. So we have one more question left for the panel, and that's for the online or offline panelist, namely Eva Ortega-Pino. And so the question is, what tools and frameworks will be most effective for aligning national polar strategies under a shared European vision while respecting regional diversity? And we'll see what Eva's answer is.
Well, this is not an easy question because in fact we understand that many of the tools are not existing yet at the EU catalogue of tools or instruments. And of course they need to be invented, or if there are some, need to be adapted. I would say that the most important tool would be, for example, flexibility. Polar science is tremendously active and innovative because climate change is modifying so fast the polar regions. Of course, these keep up discovering relevant aspects that are unexpected, or they were unexpected. This is not frequent in other kind of sciences. So the tools for aligning national polar strategy in the European realm require in first step to identify the European vision. EU PolarNet 1 and 2 have done an excellent job focusing the scientific priorities, providing a number of tools as a European Polar Coordination Office. But all that excellent work requires to be adopted by the scientific European authorities and transferred in a policy document endorsed by EU as some kind of guidelines. Then national programs can decide if they want or can join the proposed guidelines. But I bet, most of us will be happy adapting those endorsed documents up to their possibilities. Last 8 years, our delegates at the EU PolarNet, a European Polar Board, have been working very hard. All the material has to arrive to an end and it would need to be adopted by those national programs and national authorities of the EU. That's the homework, perhaps with help of EPCO. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think that with this we will need to close this panel. We are way behind time, and also end this session with thanking the panelists for great contributions to an important discussion, and a big applause.
You can hear me? Yes. Great. Perfect. Okay, so welcome to this second panel here. And I think I'm going to be very rude and not introduce the panelists. Yeah, and the main reason for that is I think we have got super clever brains here, and we are allowed to pick their brains. We should seize the opportunity. And you can all read about their long CVs. I'm sure there are extensive versions of this online as well, if you want to know more. So I think we just skip that. And I think the only thing I would say is that this panel will focus on how the European polar science community can strengthen its role within the objectives and frameworks of major international initiatives, including IPY 2032-2033, and the UN Decade of Action for Cryospheric Sciences, starting this year, which you have already heard about before the break. I think we also have one panelist online.
Yes.
Henry? Yay! Have you ever tried the Beam Me Up Scotty, Henry? No? Beam Me Up? Beep beep? Oh, obviously not a Star Trek fan. Sorry about that. Oh yeah. Well, next time you will be here in person, and we look forward to that. Anyhow, the first question goes to you, Henry. How can the next IPY contribute to strengthening international partnership and networks in polar science, especially among countries with limited polar research capacity?
Thanks, Margareta. Thank you. Really good to see you. And sorry, I'm not there in person next time. That's a really good point. And some of you have heard me, seen me talk or heard me talk about International Polar Year in the last 6 months will have heard me say that although we are very grateful and we acknowledge all the input and the success of countries of North America and Europe in previous IPYs, this 5th IPY is not a North American IPY or a European IPY. It's an international polar year. And that's really, really important. Because there are countries who are active in the Antarctic, who are not active in the Arctic. There are countries who are active in both, but are not part of IASC or of SCAR. And so we want to reach out to every single country, every organization that wants to participate. I have the pleasure of going to lots of conferences, and I've spoken to lots of representatives from countries there who are very interested in International Polar Year, but who are not the usual suspects, basically. So we will find space for everyone that wants to participate. I know that particularly on the Arctic side, as we develop those Arctic science priorities through the ICARP process, that will become a kind of a public, open, easily findable set of priorities. And any university or country, whether they're involved at the moment in polar science or not, can look at those and see where they might have a contribution to make. And then we would love to hear from them. I really hope, and it's certain it will be the case, that when the national committee for the International Polar Year is set up, that committee of all the different points of contact from different countries, I think everyone will have the same status there. So whether you're the US, who I hope is there, and whether you're the UK or Norway or Sweden, or you're the United Arab Emirates or Greenland possibly, or Luxembourg, we will find a place for you in that committee. So yes, very much our eyes are absolutely on making sure IPY is as inclusive as possible.
Sounds like a big happy family, and we look forward to hanging out with that big happy family. So my next question goes to Anil. What is the main objective and the key priorities of the UN Decade of Action Cryospheric Sciences, and how can the UN Decade of the Cryosphere support research that is not only scientifically relevant, but also meaningful and beneficial to the communities and ecosystems most affected by these changes?
Thank you. It's a good question. I think it's a 3-page document, so I'm not going to read the 3-page document that was adopted by UN General Assembly. International Decade of Action Cryospheric Sciences. So what are the keywords? Decade of Action Cryospheric Sciences, meaning that we need to have scientific understanding. So the first and foremost is to focus on science. What is science? We need to have observation, modeling, monitoring, data collection, and then if based on that observation, we also need to do modeling, forecasting, in order to provide better informed decision making. So these are the objectives that flow through. But we need to make it relevant to the lives and livelihoods. Somebody said this morning, in the previous session, the Arctic is also with the human system. So we need to make relevant to the people living in these regions. So that's why it has to deal with socioeconomic vulnerability and adaptation that comes with. But also heritage, the reindeer community, the mountain community, the community that depends on that, and also our some of the spiritual basis perhaps, the cultural aspect. So that also needs to be taken into consideration. And then we need to create buy-in effect. How do you create buy-in effect? Engage citizens in the process, citizen science, and make science open. So that is the objective. And in order to have that to happen, we need to make policy advocacy campaign at all levels, from the basin level to the regional level to the European level to the UN level. And in order to do that, we need funding. So these are, if you pack together, these are the main objectives.
Thank you very much. Now, Antonio, you have to represent Europe. No burden whatsoever, I'm sure. But how can Europe promote scientific collaboration across polar regions and cryospheric domain to maximize the impact of global initiatives like the IPY and the UN Decade?
Thank you, Merete. I think that the first idea is that the scientific collaboration already exists in the polar community. I mean, we are polar scientific community. We are collaborating continuously. So, and we even have structures, like for instance in the Antarctic, COMNAP, that facilitates that interaction, logistic sharing, and activity. So this is not very difficult for us. We are used to that. I mean, this is a part of our genetic background. So this is not difficult. The second point is about the European Union, what role they have to play in here. And that's important, that's very important, but it's difficult. In any case, I think that the role that the EU has to play is key. So it has to be a key role, because under the geopolitical situation that I explained before, I think that this is the moment for the European Union. Now is the moment that we have to exploit our activity, our multilateralism, our capability of working together, and we need to push that way. And for that, I think that we need to do a strategy of 3 different legs. The political leg, scientific leg and communication leg. The political is very easy. We need our politicians to put the polar science in their agenda. It has to be, we need the politicians to understand that this is really important, and they have to understand, and they have to repeat, to keep repeating that. And this is, I think, is not very difficult. So if we are able of permeating that political level, we can reach that point. The second point is scientifically. Scientifically, I think that the key role of European Union is, as my boss was saying before, we need to adopt what the EU PolarNet did, because it's a lot of very good ideas that have to be incorporated into the agendas. And this is how to facilitate the science. And finally, communication. Communication is crucial. I think that it's very important that our society understands that really polar sciences, both Arctic and Antarctica, are critical for the societies. And this is by repetition, I think. I'm afraid that we need to have all the different layers in our communication capabilities to be repeating the message continually, from the political to the scientific to the policymakers and to other stakeholders. So I think that's very important.
Thank you very much. So if you got to represent Europe, then Freya is representing the next generation. Yeah, that's great. So what opportunities do large-scale international initiatives like the IPY and the UN Decade offer for early career researchers? And how can access to them be improved? Because how do you know where to start?
Yeah, and that's actually the part of the question that I will be focusing on, because I think improving access is key, because there seems to be a lack of information targeted at early career researchers. I mean, they are often maybe more included through their supervisor or their networks. And then some disciplines might be more represented in these networks. And we actually want to have more, we want to include other disciplines as well. But I mean, these initiatives, they also, the research areas related to these, they get more visibility, they get new project, increased funding often, hopefully, and that will of course lead to job opportunities to ECRs and also ECR programs and courses. So that will benefit the early career researchers. And I also discussed with the fellow early career researchers working with the questions related to the Arctic, and our knowledge about this UN Decade of Actions and the IPU was unfortunately quite limited. And I started to hear more about these initiatives when I started my position within APEC Sweden. So the knowledge about these initiatives is sadly limited for most ECRs, despite that especially the IPU state that they aim to include ECRs, and they also, I mean, we heard that they have a task group for ECRs, and they have included ECRs. I mean, APEX is in the planning group of IPU, so apparently within APEX we should also be more effective with spreading this information about these initiatives. But also, after listening to Henry Burgess and Anil, Mishra's presentations about IPU and the UN Decade of Actions, we now have a group within APEC Sweden with increased knowledge about these initiatives. And I think that's an important message, because thank you for being included and invited here.
Thank you. And as you say, it's a really good beginning. A really good start to know. Okay, we have all been representing someone, and of course, Lena Maria, you're representing the Indigenous and local people. What does meaningful partnership with Indigenous communities look like within the context of long-term, globally coordinated polar and cryosphere research?
Yeah, so I'm Indigenous. I'm also integrated in the scientific society. And the answer on this question, what is meaningful partnership, I think Elle Merete, Omma, she really expressed that really well. So the keywords I picked from her is our needs, building trust, take time, value time, and how to apply, have a dialogue along that. So the short answer is that meaningful partnership starts by including Indigenous knowledge and priorities from the very beginning. And here in Umeå, we have two good examples related to health research. And one is Haldi project in Jokkmokk municipality, and one is the Sámi Health on Equal Terms study. And the partnership between the Sámi parliament and the Swedish health agency, Folkhälsomyndigheten, that was actually fundamental for this success. It was the first ever nationwide Sámi health survey that we performed in 2021. And that was meaningful partnership. Next year, 2026, we plan to do a follow-up study, not yet funded, but we are optimistic. And the long-term goal is to continue the partnership and the dialogue to build a national center for Sámi health research here in Umeå, similar to the one that you already have in Norway, in Tromsø. And if I answer from a European perspective, actually the answer would be exactly the same, because the Sámi is the only indigenous people in Europe. And the meaningful partnership here, am I allowed to dream a little?
Please go ahead.
So then, why not establish a European Center for Sámi health research? Meaningful partnership, yes.
Thank you for sharing your dreams.
Yeah.
We very much appreciate it. And also repetition, you know, that's very good, because then we learn. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Maria, of course we want to know about EPB and how you see the role of EPB in coordinating and amplifying European contributions to global polar and cryosphere initiatives.
Yes, thank you. So the European Polar Corps sees itself as a key coordinator and amplifier of Europe's contributions to global polar and cryosphere initiatives. With Europe's strong scientific capabilities and collaborative spirit, there is a real opportunity to turn individual efforts into a powerful collective impact. So first, by aligning the diverse expertise of our members that goes from national research programs at universities to logistic and infrastructure operators, EPB helps transform Europe's many contributions into a comprehensive and visible force on the global stage. So these coordinations ensure that European science is not only excellent, but it's also well organized and ready to contribute effectively to international initiatives. Second, EPB plays an important role in connecting the European research communities, enabling them to share knowledge, best practices, and resources. By supporting joint planning and fostering collaboration, we make sure that Europe science adds value globally, either through shared data platforms, coordinated field campaigns, or joint research outputs. And beyond coordination, EPB amplifies Europe's collaborative approach, one that emphasizes openness, shared infrastructure, and transnational partnerships. By promoting this model, EPB helps demonstrate how science across nations can work together to tackle the complex challenges that the polar and cryosphere regions face today. So in short, EPB's role is to connect, coordinate, and amplify, ensuring that Europe's collective strengths have maximum visibility, reach, and impact in advancing global polar science.
Thank you very much. So this is the time when I will go over here and do some moonwalk. Nay, I won't do that, but I did see some very heavy eyelids. And I think I got your attention now, so that's great. Now we are back on track. Good. So, Antonio, are you ready for the next one? Yes,
Okay.
you are, of course, always ready. Rapidly changing world we're in, obviously. How can polar scientists ensure that their research remains relevant in a rapidly changing world, especially in terms of policy and environmental decision making?
Thank you very much again. So we polar scientists are a special gang. We are a special group of people that we are working. We are used to work in very harsh conditions, and we understand very clearly that we need to collaborate. I mean, for us, it's not a problem. And at the same time, we work in thematics that they are not so competitive. So we are happy about sharing everything. So for us, it's not difficult to do any of those things. And in fact, for Antarctica, we have a law that obliges us to share things. So for us, it's a collaboration is not a real difficulty. And for inside, I believe that we, the polar scientific community, we are quite easygoing and flexible community. We are easy, and we are able of adapting to what is coming. What is real, in fact, is that we are depending so much on the logistics, and logistics at the same time depends on big budget, on political decisions, that we are following what our politicians say. So, but we are so adaptable, we are so flexible that we are very fast. As soon as new opportunities are open, we follow that track, and we are able of keeping that running. With that, what I want to say is that it's not our task. Our task is to do science, not to assure that that science is going to go forever. We do science. And if we are facilitated, we can do it, and very well. And we communicate that. But it's not our task to demonstrate. So this is another issue.
Thank you very much. Lena Maria, I want to come back to you, if I may. I think you're sort of in the corner there.
Yeah, we should have had a circle.
Yes.
My indigenous knowledge would prefer a circle.
Yes, but let's pretend we have got this very nice circle, just slightly, not round shape. But what are the critical aspects of indigenous knowledge that should be prioritized during the International Polar Year and the decade to ensure that research is both meaningful and respectful? We just want a long list.
Yeah, and of course it's an impossible question, but
yes,
I think like scientific knowledge and in traditional knowledge is very different from each other, and like it's tables, diagrams, theoretical frameworks, and we have culture and art and storytelling. But if we think about scientific knowledge and traditional knowledge as two circles, I think the most interesting part is where they overlap, in the intersect. And there is where you can find a space for innovation. So a concrete example, maybe a little cryospheric, hopefully. In Sámi here, we recognize 8 seasons. We divide the year in 8 seasons. And in Southern Europe, you have only 4 stagioni, 4 saisons. So how do we interpret climate change in the Arctic? If we compare with the lenses of 8 seasons compared with 4 seasons, I think traditional knowledge will add information, add details. So depending on the questions, it's the intersect that is the most important part.
Identifying them.
Yeah.
Interesting. Henry, are you still with us? Yes, you are. Great.
Of course.
Of course, of course. I've been here all along. So, in terms of long-term impact, how can the IPY, the next IPY, shape the direction of future polar research and policy, particularly for younger generations of scientists and policymakers?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there are two things in tension, aren't there? Because in the International Polar Year, it will really be successful if we can demonstrate to policymakers that there are solutions, there is real world impact, there is strategic knowledge that we need to gain about changes in the Arctic and the Antarctic that will make a real difference to the efficiency, to the success of policy decisions kind of all around the world. And that's something that we should be aiming for. And I hope we can find a way to find that within the vision. At the same time, we need to be very careful, I think, not to load down the International Polar Year with a lot of sort of political or diplomatic missions, because I think the real success will come through giving the International Polar Year a genuinely strong science focus. You know, yes, science with impact, but a science focus, not asking it to do kind of diplomacy by itself. In the third International Polar Year, the one that created the Antarctic Treaty System, they didn't set off with that polar year, that geophysical year, thinking the end result of our work will be that the world creates the Antarctic Treaty System. That came about as a result of a response to what the scientists and the researchers were doing. So I think if we plan the IPY in the right way, if we're as inclusive as voices north, south, Indigenous, non-Indigenous as we can be, then we'll give ourselves the best chance to balance up those two areas. I'm absolutely committed, and I know the other people within the IPY planning group and executive committee are too, to making sure that early career researchers, young voices are heard and have a role within the system. There is, being no doubt, we are very keen for everyone to participate and to find a role. There is no huge organization of the IPY. There is no factory of 100 people working on this. We are all the International Polar Year. So if people want to participate, if people want to put their hand up within Apex or out of Apex, we really, really want to hear from them, because there will be a space for everyone. And whether there are big initiatives that provide PhD opportunities or postdoc opportunities, or whether there are really small focused things taking place just in one community or one university, that's all of those will find their place within the International Polar Year. I'm absolutely certain. And one of the movers and shakers behind this is Sarah Strand from Apex, the executive director, and it's fantastic that she's been involved and continues to be involved. And Gerlis Fugman, who is our IASC executive secretary, is the previous director of Apex, and she bows to no one in her commitment to make sure that ECRs are well represented. So thank you.
Thank you, and very reassuring to hear. Anil, are you up for the next one?
Yes.
Thank you. What would be the coordination mechanisms of the decade under the leadership of UNESCO? And how can UN Decade of the Cryosphere drive international cooperation and funding mechanisms to ensure that polar and cryospheric research remain prioritized in the context of global sustainability goals? Long one.
Very long question.
Should I start from the beginning? No, you remember it?
No, I remember. I think first we have to think what is the relevance of what we are doing. So what is the relevance? We know that we are not going to meet Paris climate target. Okay, overshoot of 1.5 degree, that means that lots of cryospheric state, the glaciers, the ice sheets will be gone. So meaning that we have to understand what would be the melting process. I come from Nepal, from the Himalayas. In the Himalayas, out of 58,000 of glaciers, there are very little glaciers are monitored. Out of 200 glacier lake, which are ready to outburst flood, only 2 are monitored. So, in that situation, you need to have the coordination mechanism that would understand what is the gravity of the problem. But also, what are the opportunities? You can use the pristine water for probably in the short term, long term. So you have to come up with that strategy. Okay. Similarly, with the melting processes in Arctic and Antarctica, somebody already referred, there may be transportation system might open. So what are the opportunities? We need to look at socioeconomic aspect. So these governing structures should be based on what milestone we want to achieve. And finally, I think we need to create buy-in effect. The innovative ideas from youths, young generation, and who really, I remember when I was doing my PhD 25 years ago, my PhD supervisor used to tell me that all the innovative ideas comes from PhD students or postdoc. After that, they will, benefit. I don't know. And also to really engage citizens in the process. So probably we need to integrate all those. And if we can show the relevance, I think funding processes, particularly now, the Green Climate Fund, loss and damage, global environmental facility. So these are multilateral system, but also from the European perspective, I think we can really convince if we can show the relevance. Now, finally, the governing structure, we are working together with the stakeholders. And as I mentioned, this morning, invitation went out, including European Polar Board, to work together to propose governing structure, and that will be set up under the leadership of UNESCO.
Thank you very much. Freya, how can early career scientists contribute not only through research, but also through communication, innovation, and co-creation within these initiatives?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. With the last question, I focused on access. And now I think, again, communication and inclusion, those are key so that early career researchers can contribute. And we can contribute. I mean, that's no question. And here, networks like Apex can be really valuable because through networks like this, communication can be targeted to early career scientists. I mean, it's really good to be included in events like this. But for early career researchers also, so that we can be able to contribute in innovation and co-creation, we also need low threshold spaces to safely discuss and network and gather courage to step up in more high-level events like this. And this is also something that needs funding, even though we can't produce in a very scientific way during that stage. So, and then I think that including early career researchers will also mirror back how well these initiatives are succeeding in informing the early career researchers, because it's also a valuable opportunity to teach the next generation and let the next generations have this sense of being part of building the future. And I don't want to stand here and convince you about how much ECRs can contribute and innovate and produce, because we will, given time and opportunity, the time is on our side. So I would like to argue that it's obvious that the early career researchers need to be included if these initiatives are to have long-term impact. Because even if the contribution today would be small, these researchers, they are learning, they are building networks, they are raising their voices, so they are building for the future. So, I mean, the early career researchers are the experts of tomorrow. Yeah, and that's actually what I wanted to say.
Very wise words indeed. Last question that has already been prepared, and that goes to you, Maria. Yes. How can the EPB support better collaboration between international polar initiatives for the scientific knowledge to reach and shape policy discussions more effectively?
Yes, thank you. So the European Polar Board has an opportunity and a responsibility to strengthen collaboration among international polar initiatives so that our science does not only inform, but truly drives policy at this critical time. EPB celebrates its 30th birthday this year. We have 30 years of experience gathering national voices and connecting regional actions to global initiatives. This gives us a strong foundation and also a powerful mandate to continue and build more. Beyond its diverse membership, which already represents a European polar voice. EPB can act as a key connector, bring together scientists, policy and decision makers, funders, organizations, and through regular dialogues, align priorities and foster joint actions. This also can happen with IPY and the UN Decade of Cryosphere, and this is why we wanted to be involved from the beginning. And in a time when the polar regions are changing faster than ever, we simply cannot continue working in silos. So coordinated strategies are essential to amplify our collective voice and impact. Second, we must sharpen the way we communicate science to policy. EPB, together with EPCO, the European Polar Coordination Office, can mobilize their members, the EU funding research and their extending network, and coordinate actions to translate science into clear, targeted policy briefs and recommendations so they can reach decision makers when it's needed the most. And finally, EPB is already contributing to, and we can continue doing that and better, to contribute to initiatives that champion collaborative research and open data sharing across nations and disciplines. This is key to build trust, to foster innovation, and maximize the influence of polar science to global policy. So in short, through coordination, collaboration, and communication, that are the three strategic pillars in EPB strategy, EPB and EPCO together can lead efforts and unite actors to ensure that polar science does not only form policy, but actively shapes it to deliver the urgent responses that our polar ecosystems and hence the planet need.
Thank you very much, Maria. So now is the time for me to tell a little story. During the last International Polar Year, we had a meeting in Stockholm. I attended, and then we were sat in the audience, and we weren't allowed to ask one single question. I got pissed off, and I went to ABBA Museum instead, which was lovely, of course. But the bottom line is, we have now saved some minutes. So I will actually hand over to you now. You should not just sit there in the audience. You should have the opportunity to pick their brains. So can I please have a microphone, and I can be running around if there is anyone who would like to have a question.
And we also have our online participants as
and
well.
Of course, online. And Eva, will you keep track of that if there is someone who would like to ask anything about the online? So no pressure, but Vito, I know I could count on you. Absolutely.
We was a little bit talking a little bit too much about political. What about society? What about the general? Who are the main stakeholder for us? So just a question.
Within IPY
in our work, in our job, in our response, we are talking about EPY, decade of the Cryosphere, and so. But looking to our work and research and discover what is happening, who should be the main stakeholder for us?
That would be our grandchildren.
Grandchildren. We should aim for them. We had another one here.
Yes, thanks very much for the very nice insight. The question related to the question that I have is related to the private stakeholders. Where are they? And I'm thinking about companies, private companies. How do we engage if we want to engage with them, and how? I mean, where do we find the connection with them?
Should we pass that over to Henry, or
if we want to have a connection with them?
Could you hear the question, Henry? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Arctic, there is a lot of also discussion and debate about resources and technological development, mapping. So.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I don't think we are as advanced as a community about connecting through to those kind of opportunities as we should be. But we have a country and funders task group within the IPY planning process, and that's kind of splitting in two directions. One of which will be countries, and the other one will be funders, including kind of private foundations, private companies, kind of other kinds of funders of science and engagement. So we will be producing a plan for how we involve them in the International Polar Year. So it's a very good point. I don't think we're as good as we could be, but it's on our radar for sure.
Is there? I I got two now. Is there anyone else who would like to add? Yes, please.
Yeah, I want to add, as I said, with this unprecedented changes, we have to adapt. And when it comes to adaptation, we need to see how to really engage the companies that can provide adaptation. I give you a couple of examples. For instance, using water resources in the short term, but also with the 3D printers and low-cost sensors. Now there is a possibility of innovative solution. And we tested, we have published a book recently on using citizen science. But in our brainstorming session, we invited BNP Paribas, for instance, a banking sector, whether they see any challenges. But I think in the decarbonization process, the role of private sector is very important. It's very important. We really need to talk to them, yeah.
Thank you. And we have another. Yes, please.
Maybe this is like naming the elephant in the room, but capitalism is also a driver of climate change. And so that's the challenge, to balance the alliance with companies. And we know like the greenwashing, the green transition here in the north is not always a just green transition. So I think we need social science research that is actually finding new solutions, just ways of building a future. So, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in the audience? You got the opportunity now. You don't have to go to the Ebba Museum. It's not here, by the way. No? Eva, what does it look like online? It's fine? Well, in that case... Oh, I got two. That's not a good idea, I assume. Sorry. Thank you. In that case, I think we should give our panelists a big applause, and thank you ever so much for your insights.